Yeah, I see two trends coming up. One is workforce aging, so the type of people who are performing the work are changing, and the second trend is the increasing service sector, so that more and more jobs are in the service industry, and that requires kind of different competencies to be productive and to perform well. And I think the combination of those two trends are actually a rather good combination, because we know that older people have rather good emotional capabilities, which are very important in service work. So in that sense, I think both trends together are good news for the future.
Ja, goedemiddag. Ik ben wel heel blij dat ik in het Engels mag praten, want ik zit maar 3,5 jaar in Nederland. Dus het gaat redelijk goed, maar het is wel een beetje makkelijk. Anyway, I want to talk about two current trends that I'm seeing in the work sector recently, and that are finding their way increasingly into our work as organizational researchers. And the first trend I want to talk about is workforce aging, the fact that we are, on average, the workforce is getting older. And the second trend is the growing service sector. So the first trend, aging, is about the people who are performing the work, whereas the second trend is about the nature of the work that we have to perform. And I want to give you some background on these two trends and then talk about how these play into each other, because it must not be a very bad combination. I will show you that actually older employees might be rather well suited to perform service work. So let me start with the first trend, workforce aging. It's probably nothing new to you. It's increasingly in the news recently that the population is aging, and of course also the workforce is aging. Why is that? Well, we have medical advances, so we are on average living longer. We have very low birth rates in developed countries, so there's fewer young people coming into the population. And then of course there's also increasing political pressure to work longer. We can no longer afford that people spend like 1/3 of their lifetime in retirement. So there's this pressure that all of us have to work longer, more years. And what does it mean for companies? Well, it means that they have to increasingly think about the older workforce and their older employees. How can they motivate them? How can they support them? How can they use their potentials? And of course it also is a question for ourselves, as we are all aging. How can we best age successfully in the workplace and make the most out of our longer work lives? So yeah, as I said, the mean age of the work population is aging. There's some recent CBS statistics that in 2011 the mean age was 41. That's up 5 years from the 90s. In the 90s the mean age of working people in the Netherlands was 36. So I'm not sure this will continue in the same speed in the future, but if it were, then we would have mean age workers of 51 in 40 years. That's quite old, of course. And indeed, in 2011, it was the first time that if you look at all the employed men in the Netherlands, then you had more people in their 50s than in their 30s for the first time in history. And that trend is increasing. Now, aging brings some challenges, and our knowledge about aging in the workplace is rather limited at this point. What we know is that there's a number of negative stereotypes. So there's these ideas about older employees that they're less flexible, they're unwilling to learn, they're really high costly, and most importantly, and probably the worst of all these negative stereotypes, is that older employees are less productive than younger workers. The question is that true? Do we have any evidence to suggest that older people are indeed less productive than younger people? There's some research suggesting no. If you look across all the sectors, all types of jobs, we do not see any evidence of reduced productivity with age. But then there's other people who say, well, that cannot be true. I mean, that doesn't make sense. There must be some reduction in productivity as we get older. And the true answer probably is in the middle, so I would suggest it depends. It depends on the nature of the work we have to perform, whether the capabilities, the things we need to be productive are competencies that improve with age or decline with age. And there is, that's kind of the interesting thing about aging, there's positive and negative changes that we can expect. There's gains and losses. Certainly we have losses in physical strength and so on. and in our processing speed and certain mental capacities, we clearly have losses. We learn less well, and our memory declines. We are slower in processing information. But there's also gains as we get older. We gather a lot of experience. We increase in the knowledge that we have, also job-specific knowledge. It just is it should not be outdated, and it doesn't help us anymore, our knowledge about procedures from 20 years ago. But then there's another aspect or another capacity that actually benefits from aging, and that is emotional. These are emotional capacities. And that's also the main focus of my own research. So we see a lot of positive changes in emotions as people age. They feel better overall. They react less strongly to stressors. They are better at avoiding conflicts. And there are also, if you look at the types of strategies they use to regulate emotions, you see that they are more competent in many ways to regulate their emotions. Not all emotional competencies increase with age. Interestingly, perceiving other people's emotions is something that declines. Now, why is all this relevant? Why am I telling you about this? Now I come to the second trend. I want to talk about the growing service sector. Now, if you work in the service sector, then emotional competencies are key. The productivity of service employees is mainly dependent on their emotional capabilities, on the quality of the interactions that they have with their customers or patients or clients and so on. So to what extent can they create a positive atmosphere? To what extent do they manage to make the clients or patients feel respected and cared for and understood? So that poses a lot of emotional job demands to be a service employee. And we know from research that being exposed to a lot of emotional job demands can be draining. It drains our resources. We feel exhausted at the end of the day. And if that becomes a chronic state, then over the long time we will have bad health, low well-being, and also reduced performance. Now, luckily, we know a little bit already about different ways to deal with emotions and emotional job demands in a way that we don't have those negative consequences of service work. So research shows that the way people deal with emotions largely depends or largely determines the well-being and performance outcomes of emotional job demands. And we've ourselves also done some research on that, and actually one of my students, Katarina Kuba, who's in the audience today, has done a nice study on the strategy of accepting negative emotions. And she has found that in a sample of healthcare workers who are exposed to a lot of emotional job demands, those people who are high on accepting negative emotions, which is supposed to be a very healthy strategy to deal with emotions, feel better, are more engaged at the end of the day. This was a diary study, so we could also track emotional experiences across multiple days. So they felt better overall, but most importantly, when something negative happened on a day, then those people who used this very healthy emotional regulation strategy were less affected by that. So acceptance is just one strategy to deal with negative emotions. There are many more, and there's a lot left to be learned. So let me now come to combining those two trends. I told you about workforce aging, we spoke about the fact that older employees tend to be rather good in emotional competencies. So this raises an intriguing question, namely whether older employees are better prepared to perform service work. And my hunch is yes, in many ways they are. It probably also depends on a number of context factors, which we should find out. So it probably depends on the specific emotional demands we are looking at, individual differences in strategy use, and also job characteristics. So we should probably look at different context factors, job design characteristics that help people use the emotional regulation strategies that they learn to be healthy, such as autonomy. So this was my vision on two important trends that we are witnessing today, and as I said before, it must not be a bad combination, so older people might actually be pretty well prepared to do service work, which is good news, I think. Thank you.